You're good to go?
Uh, so we realized our bill was high. So that's the reason why we started looking into solar. So when people end up going solar, there actually is a solar cycle that happened and has been happening over the last about 8 years now. So when people end up going solar, the utility company, it will lose money. And the utility company often will give credit and sometimes a return of power whenever the house needs it, but a lot of those advantages are getting less and less. So when they end up losing money, they do what any kind of utility company or corporation will do, is they'll raise rates. So right when they end up raising rates, they raise rates for many reasons. For fires, they'll raise rates for insurance payouts because of the fires. They'll raise rates because of stock buybacks and dividends. They'll raise rates because of bonuses and pensions. And then they'll raise rates simply because, well, they're a monopoly of that market and they can. So nothing is really going to stop them from raising it. So when they raise rates, more people go solar. And so this has been happening since 2018. So now we're in 2025, and people always wonder, well, what are the rates at? So right now, as of 2018, the rates were at 17 of the lowest non-care. And now the lowest non-care for 2025 is 40. And then people say, oh, well, that's just like everything else. Well, not true. Because in 1918, the rate was about 0.4 cents. So if it was about zero point 0.4 in 1918 and then 17 in 2018, that goes to show within 100 years, it only goes up about 17 cents, basically. So about 100% every 100 years, let's say. But it went up more than it did the previous 100 years in 7 years. So in just 7 years, it went up more than the previous 100 years combined. This is the problem. So how we combat this problem is a lot of people used to go, and I'm going to put no first because it's not done this way anymore, but it used to be done this way, is people used to take out loans, they used to get leases, they used to get liens on their property, they used to go into debt, they used to purchase it. So solar used to be done in so many different ways, but it's not done this way primarily anymore. And the reason why it's not is because it wasn't truly beneficial then. It's not truly beneficial now. There are better ways to do it. So what ended up happening is in 2018, the schools, churches, the hospitals, and then some businesses and other municipalities, they basically started to use solar as a utility because it gave them a fixed rate rather than the variable rate that the utility company was using. So in their fixed rate that they got around, on average, of what their first year was, it was about 15 cents on average, but it had a capped rate of inflation. So over time, they're actually paying just about 18 cents now per kilowatt instead of 40 cents per kilowatt. So what this is called is called the power purchase agreement. Now, this power purchase agreement is the very same similar agreement that Edison or any other utility company will use today. And they give you a variable utility that's gone up 16 to 20% each year, as you can see. So it's gone up over 140% here. So on average in those 7 years, it's about 20%, but Some years it's like 16, other years it's like 22. So I'll say 16 to 20. And they're starting at a low 40 cents per kilowatt. The other utility that schools, churches, hospitals, and some businesses and other municipalities switched to, along with some other residential and homes, they switched to a backup battery utility plus solar. The backup batteries are pretty new. They're actually, as of 2023, due to the NEM 3 change, were added due to how power was shared in the net energy metering program. So, but this is a fixed rate utility. So it only goes up, between like 3.5% depending on the agreement, or 2.9. It's more often to be 3.5 at this point though. And then most of these utilities start in the low 20s, low to mid 20s per kilowatt. So instead of starting at 40, you're going to start at the low mid 20s. And then what happens is a representative like myself or someone else, they'll go over your usage of your bill. Then they'll make a report. And then if you like the report in their appointment when they show it to you, you get to schedule a survey for the home. And all of this is done for zero out of pocket. Because once again, you're just qualifying utility 1 against utility 2. And if you like utility 2 more than utility 1, you can end up getting utility 2 as your primary utility, primary A. And then your current utility, your older one, will now be primary B. So if you use more power than A can produce, you'll receive that power from B. And the rates are really, really similar. So when it comes down to of what you'll be paying. So obviously with A, you'll be paying a lower utility rate. And then with B, if you have to use excess power that A didn't produce, you'll be paying B's utility rate. So the changes when it comes to how you use power doesn't really stop. There's no changes there. I'm sorry, is how I mean it. There's no changes in how you use power. The change happens basically on how much your power now costs because of the equipment you're now using with utility A in comparison to the equipment you're using with utility B. So what ends up happening now is the CPUC approves every homeowner to go with this new utility. So you have to submit a CPUC document, and then you have to submit a document to the company that's providing you the new utility. So it has to go through a couple steps, but just to give you guys a little long story short here, is the CPUC manages all these utility companies: SCE, SDG&E, PG&E, SoCalGas, and then et cetera, so on and so on. So these utility companies, most of them anyway, are all owned by Sempra Utilities. And Sempra Utilities is basically the monopoly that runs these utilities. And these utilities, when they need a rate increase, they lobby the CPUC. So the thing you have to understand here is that when there's a rate increase issued, a lot of people that retire from these utility companies, they go to work for the CPUC. So the CPUC is like a boardroom of individuals that help govern the actual energy market here in, utility and energy market here in California. So basically they have a lot of former executives there. They used to work for these utility companies because obviously you need to have experienced personnel that know what they're doing when it comes to managing a public utility service throughout the state. So basically when it comes down to rate increases, a lot of these individuals know each other and they know why these rate increases might be needed for these utilities or for these companies. So whenever they're requested, they're most likely to be accepted. So this is the reason why when we have net energy metering agreements, so NEM, they'll change from like 1 to 2 to 3. So NEM 2 was our most recent one before NEM 3, obviously 1, 2, 3. It changed from 2 to 3 in 2023, like I mentioned earlier, April 2023. And the reason why it changed is because the utility company was losing too much money on the old NEM agreement, which was a 1-to-1 agreement. So if the solar panels on the house sent in power, and the power goes through your meter, plus minus, and then it goes out to the energy grid, and then it gets sent back when you need it, or the house uses power, there's going to be a debit and a credit, hence the plus minus sign on the meter. And you'll either have a credit from how much power you produced, or a debit, meaning you used more power than what you produced, and Edison had to provide you that. So this agreement was losing the utility company's money. So they had to raise rates. So when they had to raise rates, it wasn't enough, repeating this cycle throughout the years. Raising rates wasn't enough to encapsulate the losses they were having, including the fires and the insurance and the stock buybacks and dividends, and just being a monopoly, they just needed to earn a certain amount of money. So basically they had to change the NEM agreement from NEM 2 to NEM 3. And the reason why they changed is, well, they're losing money. So when they ended up changing it, instead of being 1-to-1, it then became 1 to 0.3. So they're technically, on average, they were taxing customers 70% of the generation that they sent in. So when homes generated power, now, the solar utility companies had to do something so they can make sure they can give homeowners a better advantage than just 1 to 0.3. So what they decided to do, instead of sending power into the grid, is they decided to just store the power in a battery. And then the house is going to use all the power in the battery. So sometimes it's about 90 to about 95% of the solar's generation into the battery gets used by the house. The excess, which is about 5 to 10%, so that gets sent into the actual grid. And then based on how much credit there is, it gets sent back. On how much uses there is by the house, you'll get credit for the power you produce. So now what happens is you're using 100%, sometimes 90 to 95% of your power from your batteries at a lower rate than what you're pulling power from the grid. And this is how this utility now works. You're going to produce less expensive power that's stored in your batteries at a lesser rate than what you're pulling power from the grid utility. So that's how this utility works. And then now we'll get into how your model works exactly for you.